They told you your dark side was a mistake, a flaw, a moral failure. But what if it's the exact opposite? What if your purpose is hidden in the very place that hurts the most? Most people spend their lives trying to erase the parts they're ashamed of. And that's exactly how they get lost. Carl Jung understood this before anyone else. What you avoid in yourself is what completes you. It's not the light that will set you free. It's the shadow. And it's not here to punish you. It's here to remind you of what you came to do in this world. You want to find meaning, then stop running from what scares you. What hurts you reveals you. And the more you face it with courage, the faster your life begins to shift. This video isn't just about spirituality, it's about finally stopping the act of surviving and starting to truly live. But for that, you'll have to face what you've been hiding for far too long. Some people listen, others pretend they didn't hear. But the calling comes, and it doesn't knock, it breaks in. It doesn't arrive with beautiful words or promises of peace. It rips you out of illusion with the same violence death tears the soul from the body. Carl Jung knew that abyss between worlds. When his heart failed, every mask shattered, the ego imploded. And what remained was a question that echoes across generations. Who are you without the role you've been playing? This is the beginning of the rupture. That moment when you realize you've lived your whole life obeying a script you never wrote, and now you have to choose, keep pretending or face the raw truth of your soul. The calling is not romantic, it's traumatic. It crushes certainties, ruins plans, implodes identities, and thank God, because if it didn't destroy the fake, you'd never access the real. True spirituality begins here, in collapse. The day your job disgusts you, your friends bore you, your relationship suffocates, and you realize you're dying while alive. But something inside still pulses, a spark, the self, the archetype of wholeness poking you from within, demanding that you tear through the ego and look in the mirror. You know that sudden urge to disappear, to leave it all behind. Maybe it's not running away. Maybe it's your soul trying to save you from the numbness. And the cruelest part is, no one prepares you. No one tells you that the beginning of life feels like a kind of death. It's not the body that dies, it's the persona, the one you built to please, survive, fit in. Shadow work isn't a trend. It's spiritual surgery. It's ripping out rotten pieces of the you invented. And you know what hurts? Realizing you never lived for yourself, that your whole story was written in ink, borrowed from other people's expectations. But now, the pen is in your hand, and the page is blank, ready to be rewritten. But before you write anything, you'll have to face the silence, and what comes after silence is even more violent. What's left when everything that once defined you disappears? When your name means nothing, when your body doesn't respond, when the world doesn't recognize you. That's what Carl Jung saw when he crossed the edge of the material. Nothingness, a total, silent, formless void. But unlike what the ego fears, the void is not punishment, it's revelation. It's where everything false collapses and everything real remains. In that space where no noise exists, consciousness is born, no words, no explanations, just presence, as if the soul for the first time stood completely naked and finally could breathe. Jung called that place the void of creation, because it's there, in that absolute silence, that the soul starts to remember who it is. And you? Could you handle meeting yourself in that place, where nothing distracts you anymore, where spirituality isn't a weekend activity, but the only thing that exists, where the phone doesn't ring, the feed doesn't load, and no one's watching? Because what we call life is most of the time just noise, emotional static, a stimulus addiction. The void terrifies because it silences everything the ego clings to. But it's in that silence that the self speaks. And when it speaks, there's no going back. It's like the truth you've been avoiding for years is now inside of you, screaming without sound. No therapist, no guru, no book, just you, your soul, and what's left of your courage. Some people spend their entire lives running from the void. They fill it with food, with series, with meaningless relationships, with goals that don't mean anything. But Jung discovered the opposite. The void isn't the end, it's the beginning. The beginning of everything that matters. Because it's only when you lose everything you thought you were that who you truly are begins to appear. Shadow work doesn't happen in the middle of a party. It happens in the dark when no one's watching. It's when you close your eyes and realize you're alone, but whole. And in that moment, a fierce truth emerges. If you can't face the nothing, you'll never be able to hold the everything. No one escapes it. Eventually, life returns, whole, raw, unfiltered. Jung called it the panorama of the soul. It's not judgment, it's not punishment, it's realization. You see yourself, not as you thought you were, but as you really were. You feel what you caused in others, the words that wounded, the silences that killed, the love you abandoned, and also the touches that healed, the small gestures that changed destinies. The ego tries to justify, but there are no excuses. What matters isn't what you did, it's what you were. Because in the language of the self, intention is everything. It doesn't matter how many diplomas you've collected. If you lived in falsehood, your soul carries weight, and that weight can't be faked. Imagine for a moment reliving every second of your life, not as memory, but as living energy. Feeling the abandonment you caused, the contempt hidden behind politeness, the coldness behind the "I'm in a hurry." Sounds harsh. It is, but it's freeing. Because this encounter with your own story doesn't come to punish, it comes to wake you up. And in that instant, spirituality stops being theory. It becomes responsibility. Real shadow work happens here when you stop blaming the world and start feeling the world within yourself. Jung saw that the scariest thing wasn't death. It was realizing you lived half your life trying to appear and not to be. But there's another side. You also feel the love you gave. And you feel how that love multiplied, crossed time, healed invisible wounds. A sincere look, a real listening, a brave choice. Nothing is lost. Everything returns, not in form, but in vibration. And when that vibration returns, the soul recognizes, I was present, I was light. That's the true weight of existence, not what you achieved, but what you radiated. And in that moment, something in you changes, because understanding that every gesture echoes in the invisible transforms you. There's no going back, but the hardest part is yet to come. Coming back to life with this clarity. Coming back hurts, not like a physical pain, but like a silent frustration that tears from the inside. That's what Carl Jung felt when he returned to his body after crossing the veil. Nothing made sense anymore. The appointments, the masks, the rituals of normal life. After touching the soul, everything here feels plastic. True spirituality has that side effect. It strips the shine from things that never had a soul to begin with, and you start seeing with different eyes. The ego wants to pretend nothing happened, but your body can't swallow routine anymore. Coming back isn't failure, it's a test. You've seen what's real. Now you have to pretend you believe in the play, and that tears you apart. The soul that returned is no longer the same, and the world demands you remain consistent with your old character. But how do you keep smiling at people who clearly don't see you anymore? How do you hand your days to a job that numbs your essence? Jung wrote that the world felt like a prison after his return. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a confession. He felt the body as a cage for his awakened consciousness, and this is the real challenge, living with clarity, where everyone else is still asleep. Other people's egos demand you lie, but your soul no longer tolerates masks. And so a new pain begins, living between two worlds and belonging to neither. You try to share, but how do you explain the invisible to someone who only believes in what they can touch? How do you describe the self using words created by the ego? You can't. And that's when true loneliness sets in. It's not the absence of people, it's the excess of awareness. You walk through places you once loved, but now they feel like movie sets. You talk to dear people but sense the emptiness between the lines, and everything in you screams for authenticity. Jung warned, the hardest part isn't what you saw there, it's living here after that, because when the soul expands, it no longer fits in the old structure, and the world doesn't want you to change, but you already did. And now, you must follow the trail of light you saw. It's not a staircase, it's not a place, it's not a prize. Carl Jung realized something many so-called masters still avoid saying. There is no heaven or hell, there is frequency. Each soul goes where it already vibrates. That's it. It's not about deserving, it's about alignment. Spirituality isn't a mystical escape, it's a brutal mirror. The universe won't take you anywhere different from where you already live inside. Live in lies, you vibrate low. Live in truth, the soul floats. It's not punishment, it's resonance. And that changes everything. Because no one is a victim. No one is thrown into some final judgment. You place yourself, you align yourself, you rise or you sink by your own hand. Jung described this beyond as levels, not separated by walls, but by vibration. Some as calm as a sunset lake, others dense, suffocating, chaotic. It all depends on what you've cultivated, and it has nothing to do with appearances. The persona can fool the world, but not the soul. Shadow work becomes a compass here. The more you clean your intentions, the lighter you become. The more you embrace your shadow, the more light you radiate. And the soul doesn't have to speak, it shines. It emanates what it is. And like an invisible magnetic field, each being goes where what they are already exists, not as judgment, but as an echo. And do you know what's most painful? Most people still live as if there's some divine court up there waiting to decide their fate. But the truth is, the verdict is already being written in every choice you make now, in every word that wounds or embraces, in every lie you tell yourself. Carl Jung didn't promise salvation. He offered clarity, and clarity hurts. Because seeing your life as it truly is, without ego filters, takes courage. But it's that courage that tunes your frequency, that dissolves the weight, that awakens your inner light. And it's that light, not an angel, not a god, not a belief, that will guide you. It always has. You just forgot. But forgetting is not forever. They're not angels. They're not dead relatives. They have no names, no faces, no voices, but you feel them. Carl Jung tried to explain, but there were no words, because what he saw doesn't fit in human language. These presences don't need to prove anything. They simply are. And when you meet them, you don't feel fear. You feel truth. They don't judge, they don't ask, they show. Like silent mirrors, they place your soul right in front of you. No makeup, no pose, no excuses. The ego tries to run, but there's nowhere left to go. And that's the true encounter with the invisible. When you see nothing, but understand everything. These presences aren't here to save you. They're here to remind you of what you are, what you forgot, what you ran from. Jung said this moment is a revelation, not of life, but of essence. And in that moment, you realize you were never alone. You were just too surrounded by noise to hear. The ego is deafening, the persona always loud, but the self is silence, and it's in that silence that the invisible whispers, not in words, in frequency. And you recognize it, you don't know how, you just do. It's like coming home after millennia in exile. But that home was always inside. Many think this moment would be glorious, but it's raw, it's surgical. You feel everything you caused, as if it were now. Everything you left undone, as if you still could, and everything you once repressed erupts, not as revenge, as truth. This encounter doesn't spare you, it heals you. But first, it breaks you, because nothing rebuilds without ruin. Carl Jung discovered this in Flesh and Soul. It's not God who asks, "Who are you?" It's you, unmasked, asking yourself, "Why did I betray myself for so long?" And that question opens a portal. But only those with courage to face it can cross. There are souls that can't move on, not because they're forbidden, but because they're too attached. They hover in a timeless space with no peace and no terror, just stagnation. Jung called this the grey light, a zone between worlds, between what was and what could have been. Why do they stay? Because they carry their shadow as baggage, resentment, guilt, rage, attachment, victimhood. Everything the ego didn't face in life becomes weight after death, and no matter how much the soul wants to rise, it can't, because it's not hell that traps, it's resistance. It's hard to accept that, but harder still is to keep denying it. Because true spirituality isn't about feeling peace, it's about facing chaos until it dissolves. And shadow work doesn't end with a pretty mantra. It ends in tears, in silence, in overflow. Jung saw souls stuck at the border of the invisible, not because anyone punished them, but because they couldn't forgive themselves, couldn't let go, held onto pain so tightly, it became identity. And there, in the grey light, they keep trying to justify a past that no longer exists. But as long as there's attachment, there's no passage, only repetition. The ego still tries to bargain, but I was good. But I did my best. But words don't matter. The soul doesn't move through speech. It moves through truth. And the truth is, many of us spend our lives cultivating wounds like medals, as if pain proved our worth. But Jung was clear. What isn't healed repeats, and what isn't released chains you. The weight of the unintegrated shadow is invisible to the eyes, but unmistakable to the soul. It knows what's holding you down. And until you know too, you'll keep spinning in circles, until something or someone breaks the cycle. You are not here by mistake. I know the world feels wrong, that your family doesn't understand you, that you keep swallowing your pain like it's normal. But what if I told you this is part of it? Carl Jung discovered something that changes everything. The soul chooses. You chose. You chose this body, this time, these challenges, not out of weakness, but strength. You wanted to grow, to break patterns, to heal what no one before you dared to heal. That's real spirituality. To remember that every trauma was accepted by a part of you that knew you needed it to awaken. And yes, it's brutal, but it's liberating. Be honest. How many times have you felt you came here for something greater? It's not delusion, it's memory your soul knows, but the ego tries to erase it. The persona hides it. You wear normalcy like a costume just to fit into a world that sickens you. But the pain doesn't let you forget. And it's not just any pain, it's sacred pain. It's the self pulling you toward a new cycle, and it's not gentle. It dismantles everything. Friendships end, certainties collapse, life falls apart. But do you know why? Because you asked to remember who you are, and to remember you must unlearn. Unlearn what they told you, what they shaped in you, what they made you believe was you, but it never was. And now that you feel the calling, there's no going back. You know it. You feel it. Something is pushing you forward, even if you're exhausted. And that something isn't motivation, it's mission, it's your soul whispering, get up, not to conquer the world, but to conquer yourself, because that's what you came here to do. Die in ego and be reborn in truth. You are the generation that breaks cycles, that burns silent contracts of inherited pain, that looks in the mirror and asks, how long will I keep repeating what destroys me? And that question is already a beginning, already a choice, already the soul waking from amnesia. There is something in you that never got corrupted, never sold out, never forgot. Even after all the pain, abandonment, shame and rage, even when you wanted to give up on everything, including yourself, that is the sacred, not the one from churches, not from rituals, but the one pulsing quietly in your soul, waiting for the right moment to be remembered. Carl Jung saw that place. And when he returned, he said with certainty, the soul doesn't get lost, it returns. But it only returns whole when you stop running from what you feel, when you stop rationalizing everything, when you surrender. And in that moment, the memory comes, and it doesn't come gently, it tears. You didn't come here to be normal. You didn't come here to survive. You came to remember. And when you remember, the world collapses, because what you thought mattered loses its taste. Vanity tires you. Status disgusts you. The need to please dies, because the soul doesn't want applause. It wants truth. And when that truth resurfaces, everything changes. You start to act differently, to speak less, to feel more, to say no without guilt, to walk away from what doesn't fit, to listen to your intuition like a compass you thought you lost, but was always there, just buried beneath the voice of your persona. And then comes the hardest part, living with that awareness in a world that profits from your distraction. You begin to see the games, the emptiness, the patterns, and yes, you feel anger. But soon you understand, the enemy was never the world. It was the forgetting, the numbness. And now that you remember, the sacred is no longer some distant place. It's a state of presence. It's knowing the self isn't out there, nor in the stars. It's inside you, always was. And from here on out, every choice you make, every yes, every no, every silence will be either a tribute or a betrayal of that truth. And you'll have to decide, will you honor that light or bury it again? The soul's greatest pain isn't death, it isn't loss, it isn't failure, it's forgetting who you are. Carl Jung said the true human tragedy isn't the death of the body, but the sleep of the essence. And you know that. You know because you feel it. You feel that something inside is dimmed, trapped, screaming but without voice, because you've gotten used to surviving, to molding yourself, to being half, to wearing a persona that pleases everyone except yourself. And with time, that forgetting becomes exhaustion, a tiredness that sleep doesn't cure, a void that nothing fills, that is the soul begging for truth. The greatest pain of the soul is pretending. Pretending everything's fine when it's not. Pretending you're strong when you're falling apart inside. Pretending to fit in when your soul is craving rebellion. You know you're betraying yourself, but you keep doing it. Out of fear, out of attachment, out of habit. And every time you silence yourself, something dies. Every time you abandon yourself, something sickens. And that buildup becomes symptoms, becomes anxiety, depression, existential crisis, becomes that silent question that follows you everywhere. Who did I become just to be safe? And that's when everything begins to fall apart. Because the soul can't keep pretending life has meaning while it's being denied. If you made it this far, it's because your soul has already begun to remember what it is, what it always was, what it never stopped being. And that isn't light, it isn't comforting, it's shattering. Because when you remember your light, you see all the ways you dimmed it. When you recognize the self, you realize how much you got lost trying to be what others expected. But that pain is sacred. Because it cleans, it burns away what no longer serves and leaves only what's real. The soul's greatest pain isn't the end, it's the beginning, the birth of a new being, a being you always were, but now finally have the chance to embody. You made it this far for a reason, maybe because you're tired of pretending, maybe because something inside you is begging to be born. Now the choice is yours. Will you keep repressing what makes you real, or will you use your shadow as a bridge to come back to yourself? How many times have you abandoned yourself trying to be accepted? How many parts of you are still locked in the basement of your soul, waiting for you to return? You know you weren't born just to pay bills and please people who don't see you. You came here to remember, to break cycles, to become what no one had the courage to become. And what if it's now? What if what you need isn't a new plan, but a brutal decision to stop betraying yourself? Write in the comments, what have you been hiding from yourself the most? Or better yet, what is your soul tired of denying? Maybe this is your first step back home. If this video cracked something open inside you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We still have so much to remember together.